Hello there. I'm glad to be able to join you like this in through this Apollos project. It's a bit strange that I'm not able to see any of you, or I will not be able to engage with you as you're listening to this. But I hope that you'll enjoy, and I hope you'll find something that's worthwhile as we go through this few days ahead of us. And yeah, it's a bit strange that I'm not able to see you. It have been lovely to see you. And I honestly, I will not know if you're listening or you're engaging with what I'm saying, or you're finding it very boring, or you're sleeping off. But you're absolutely free to respond, to do whatever you see fit, to you feel like. So go ahead with that. I just want to give a few bits of introduction about myself before we go into the subject matter. As you can see in the slide here, my name is Rathulung alias Casey. My family name is abbreviated as Casey. It stands for Kangjian. And usually I have a long name, Rathulung, so people usually call me by the middle section of my name, which is Thiu. So people call me Thiu. So I usually tell people to think of Matthew and don't say Matt. Okay, so Thiu. So that's how my name is pronounced. As I said, I'm glad to be able to record this and to be able to somehow connect to you in the seminary out there. I believe this will be streamed in Rwanda. I've never been to Rwanda, but it's such a great privilege that I'm able to do like this. Thank God for technology, right? And I'm so glad that even though I've not seen you, I'm not seeing you right now, that you are listening and I'm able to engage you and help and do something to. I don't know if it'll be helpful. I believe it'll be. I hope it'll be helpful, but I'm glad to be able to do something. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. All right. I think let me. Okay. So I've got a few things that I want to tell you about myself. Oh, oops, the green part. Hang on. There you go. So if you look at the map here, this is India, as you can see. You know what? I'm just gonna. Um, this is India, and I come from the eastern part of India. Okay, so if you observe this, this is the whole area. This section is called Northeast India. It's a thing. It's a small triangle that juts out in the east, and most people do not know about the things that are going on here. But this is called Northeast India, and I come from even. This is the section here. I come from even the eastern part of the Northeast India, so I come from this state called Manipur. Okay, and if you notice the surrounding maps here, this is Myanmar or Burma. This is Bangladesh, and of course this is Tibet and China. So we're surrounded by all these countries, and we are in the eastern front of the country of India. Um, yeah, so that's my state, my state of Manipur. Um, you see all this colorful display of attires here. These are my people. We're called the Naga people. The Naga people is. Let me just go back one slide. Sorry. Um, the Naga people inhabit all these areas here. If you observe the mouse movement of the mouse here, this is Nagaland, the state here, Manipur, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, and a bit of Myanmar as well. So the Naga people occupy this area that I'm covering here with my mouse. Okay, so the Naga people, we belong to. We've been called Mongoloid race. We are closer in terms of our ethnicity to people in Myanmar, in Burma, um, and in, of course, Tibet, China as well. So ethnically, we are close to these people. Okay, so you may not be aware of this before this, but there are people who look like me and who look like these photos here, and these are well within the boundaries of India. Yeah, so I think you might find this attires interesting. There's a wild buffalo, picture of a wild buffalo here. This is the spear that was used for hunting or even for in battles of against one another. This is machete, a blade that they cut things with. And so, yeah, these are the attire, and these are the women who are dancing, singing. These are very much part of the culture. And so, this is a small display of that particular culture. A few more stuff here. Again, this is intercultural studies, and I think you might enjoy these bits. This itself, I think, is already an intercultural experience right here. So, if you see on the left here, these are all artifacts. This is a necklace. And what else? These are skulls of head. The Naga people were known to be head hunters back in the days before Christianity came to them. Head hunting was part of their practices, part of their ritual, and so they would collect heads and skulls like this and adorn their houses as a sign of their victory, as a sign of their prowess and power. But also, it was believed to have some kind of spiritual connotations as well, bringing blessing on the people. So these are the artifacts. These are not quite real head. I think this is a metallic creation, but it echoes the kind of practice that they would have to put the skulls of their victims. Other things as well. This is a shawl with very colorful patterns here. You can see there are different circles, different motifs. I don't understand that very well because these are different tribes that we have within the Naga people as well. So there are beads here, there are seashells. Even though we don't live close to the sea, we've got seashells in our artifacts, which is very interesting. But yeah, that's another matter. We live in the forest like this. These are quite thick and very rainy, very wet, very tropical kind of atmosphere, of environment. We live very close to the land. We live very close to animals. And of course, in recent years, as you can see here, there has been developments, quote unquote developments, which sadly comes at the price of cutting down trees and setting up all these buildings and constructions, right? So this is just a bit of a foretaste of what our land and our people look like. And I believe that you might find some of these things quite similar to what you might have in Africa as well. Of course, I understand that you have tribes in your places as well. You've got all these motifs of colorful dresses and cultures, and you live close to the land. You live close to nature, all of the wonderful stuff. So I always find when I talk with my friends from Africa in my university here, I always find some kind of resonance when I do that. Just quickly before that, I just want to give a mention that I am currently doing PhD studies in the University of Edinburgh. Hang on, let me bring myself back. There you go. I'm currently doing PhD at the University of Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland in UK. It's in the northwest of the continent Europe. And my topic is called World Christianity. If you look down here, I've given a brief description here. PhD candidate in World Christianity. World Christianity is the subject that studies the different ways in which Christianity is practiced in different parts of the world. So we've got our friends who are from Ghana, from South Africa, of course from Asia, from China, from Korea, from Tanzania. People who are studying the different kinds in which Christianity is expressed, right? Because there's not just one type of Christianity in the world, right? There are different types, different ways of expressing, different ways of singing, different ways of worshiping. And world Christianity is the discipline to study that kind of different expressions. And I'm also one of them. My study looks at my own people, which is in the northeast part of India. So yeah, that's a bit about myself. I hope that gives you a taste of who basically I am. Of course, there's a lot more, um, but then I hope that will help you to connect with what I'm saying, and you'll be able to, so identify with what the things that we're gonna go through in this lectures, in these few lectures. So this course is called Intercultural Studies. Okay, Intercultural Studies. If you break that up, intercultural, many cultures interacting with one another, people from different cultures. Me, for example, as a Naga person, and you as somebody who is in Rwanda or wherever you are listening right now, and the way we interact with one another, even though we are from different cultures, right? Yes, in the most basic level, we are all one. We're all human. We belong to the human race, and we have different cultures, but we have uh, a lot of similarities as well. But we also know that there are different expressions and different modes of doing things, different ways of doing things, because we come from different cultures, right? Not simply because we come from different countries, but we come from different cultures. You know very well that even within the same country, there are different cultures. And these different cultures, because they have different ways of doing things, when they interact, there are some kind of differences in the way they understand things. So, this course is a way to understand what happens when persons from different cultures interact with one another. Okay. So, I've listed things that uh, three goals for this course, for this 5 lectures that we're going to have. And these are the three goals that I've listed, and I hope that you will understand these three goals well and keep that in mind, so that when as we go through these courses, you will keep this in mind and make sure that you are trying your best to achieve these goals. So I want you to make these goals as your goals as well as we go through this course. The first goal is to acknowledge, to reaffirm, and to grow in self awareness of one's cultural location. What I mean by that is that we all come from a specific cultural location. There's nobody in this world who does not have a cultural location. Even when Jesus was born in this earth, he was born in the cultural location of Judea, right? First century Judea. He was born in a cultural setting, and he grew up in that cultural setting. He ate the food of that cultural setting. He talked in the way that the people talked in that cultural setting. He laughed. He had the same humor in the way that people had different cultural setting. We all come from a specific cultural location. And it's very important to understand that. It's very important to acknowledge that, first of all, to acknowledge that, yes, I come from a specific cultural location. And to reaffirm that and say, yes, it is good, right? It is good that I came from that particular cultural location. To love your own location, not to the point of idolatry and hating other people's cultures, but to love, to reaffirm that what God made, what God has created in this world with different cultures, this is great. I come from this culture, you come from that culture. Yes, let's reaffirm ourselves and where we are, right? So to acknowledge, to reaffirm, and also to grow in self awareness. What we mean when we say self awareness is that sometimes we go around arrogantly. There's a danger that we go around arrogantly um, imposing our own views on others, right? Saying, no, that's not the way to do things. This is the way you do things. That's not the way to cook. What shall I say? That's not the way to cook beef, because I love Nagas. We love beef and pork. That's not the way to cook beef. This is the way to cook beef. You can't impose your views and your cultural uh, preferences upon other people, right? So to be self-aware, to know that I like beef because I'm a Naga, and I like beef the way I like it because I'm a Naga, and I should not force that on others. If others don't like chili in their beef curry, don't force them, right? Be self aware of your own cultural location. So the first goal is to acknowledge, to reaffirm, and to grow in self-awareness of who you are and where you came from. Very important, very important. Second goal is to gain historical and theological perspectives on intercultural realities. Intercultural realities. The fact is that today we live in a world that abounds, there's so much intercultural connections, intercultural encounters going on. There are different, when you go to the market, for example, you may see somebody from a different culture. You go to a shop and you talk to somebody, most likely they may come from a different culture. So we live in the world today in which there are these realities of intercultural encounters are happening every single day. So we want to gain a theological perspective. We want to gain a historical perspective. How has this kind of encounters happened in the past? What does the Bible say about these kind of encounters? How should we treat one another? How should we love one another? So to gain historical, theological perspective on intercultural realities. Thirdly, the goal is to reflect on the need to be sensitive in our communication, in our ministry, and in our contextualization. We need to be sensitive to those who are different from us when we communicate, when we do ministry to others, and when we contextualize our theology to others. Some of the mistakes of that has been observed in the history of mission, the history of Christianity, is that they were not. Oftentimes, people were not sensitive in intercultural studies, so they went. I'll talk more about these examples, but when, for example, when American missionaries came to my part of the world, which is in Naga Hills, they did a lot of great things. They brought education, they brought medicine, and all that. But one of the problems, one of the mistakes that they did was they were not sensitive in the way that Nagas were different from themselves. So they imposed, for example, they stopped a lot of the cultural practices. They forced the Christian converts, to stop doing the traditional practices. In other words, they were not sensitive. They were not aware of the differences in the intercultural dynamics, right? In their communication, sometimes they would say, they would they would be misunderstanding. What I'm trying to say here is that as we who are living here today, for us in our part, we need to be sensitive to the need to communicate to someone who does not speak like you, who does not think like you. We need to be able to minister to people who are different from us, right? And to be able to contextualize our theology, our teachings, or our preachings, let's say, when we talk to people. So here's the format that I want to suggest. We will have lectures for 40 minutes, in which I will primarily be talking. It's a lot of time, a lot of minutes to be talking, but I hope you will be patient as you listen to me. 40 minutes of lecture. Again, it's impossible for me to interact with you because this is a pre-recorded lecture. So the only option is for me to talk. So please don't mind. I would have loved to listen to what you have to say or questions that you have to ask. But since this is a pre-recorded lecture, this is the only way that we can do. So lectures for 40 minutes, and then I'll give you some questions during which you are to reflect. And I hope you have a pen or paper or whatever it is that you're using. Reflect on the questions that I give you for 10 minutes and think about it, write down. And maybe in a time of interaction or over WhatsApp or whatever medium we use, I'd love to read what you wrote down. And I'd love for you to share what you think and what you have reflected on these questions. Assignment, we'll see how that goes. I've got a few things in mind, but assignments, question for reflection is pretty much the assignment. But I would love for you to not just think about these things here, but take it home with you and reflect on it over the day, course of the day, and through the night as well. So this is the format that we will be using for the 5 lectures for this season. Okay, I think we need to take a breather, 2 minutes stretch, and we will get into the topic for the first lecture today. So, intercultural studies, encountering the other. Is that better? Yes, that's better. So the first lecture for this series of 5 lectures is encountering the other. Okay, encountering the other. What does it mean to encounter? Encounter is to meet. We've got 2 big chunks of culture of let's say one person, another person from different cultures, and when they meet one another, when they encounter someone who is different from them, what happens then? Okay, so that's pretty much the concept. Let's go on. This is a rather intense definition of the other, and I want you to just look closely at the definition, at the language that's used here. This definition is from the Oxford Companion to Philosophy. If you want to check it out, you can very much do that. I'm going to be talking about the concept of other, the other, okay? So in the definition is given here in phenomenology, which is a branch of philosophy, a branch of studies, phenomenology, studying the patterns and so on and so forth, are not important for this lecture. In phenomenology, the terms the other and the constitutive other identify the other human being in his and her differences from the self. Now let's paraphrase this in a simple language. In phenomenology, the terms the other. Who is the other when you're thinking about yourself? The other and the constitutive other identify, let's imagine another person, the other human being, okay? The other, this is you and this is another person. The other refers to this other person, the other human being, to the extent that he or she is different from the self, which is you. Does that make sense? So the other is an other to the extent that he or she is different from you. So let's take the example between me and you, guys, you listener and me, who is doing all the talking. For you, I'm an other because I look different from you, I speak different from you, I come from a different cultural background from you, I come from a different country from you, we've got different occupations, we've got different expectations, different families, different lives. So to the extent that I'm different from you in those terms, I'm an other to you. Okay. So when you say that I am an other, you are saying that the as being a if you go look at the definition, as being a cumulative and constituting factor. Here we go. Cumulative constituting factor in the self-image of a person, as acknowledgement of being real. So when you call me an other, you are identifying yourself compared to me. So by my culture, by my differences, you are identifying yourself as the self. You are viewing yourself as different from me, right? So in the last sentence, the other is dissimilar to and opposite of the self. I'm different from you, and so I'm opposite to you in this dynamic. You are observing, you are assessing yourself through the differences that you see in me. Now, if you find all of this very abstract and very confusing, don't worry about that. The main concept here that we need to take away is that there are people in your context, even right now, where if you're sitting together, for example, who are different from you, who is an other to you. And Sometimes the otherness, the difference is so so how to say, so expressed and so exaggerated that we push others apart. Okay, so there's an other, and the other is different from you. The other is dissimilar to you. Okay, the opposite of who you are as a self. So the people who you identify with, these are us. Okay, and the people who are out there, those are the others. So let's say in this dynamic, maybe you are right now sitting with your friends or your family. You look at the people who you belong with, and you say, this us versus them, us versus others. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit abstract, but if you've got any confusion or any any questions on this, feel free to ask me when you can get your questions in. Just give me a minute. Okay, so uh, that's the other, understanding the other. Now, the thing about other, and the thing about everyone, in fact, is that anthropologists will tell us that there are hidden dimensions of human beings. There are visible things, and there are invisible and unobserved things. These are anthropologists who tell us these things. Okay, they say that every human being, every cultures, every human beings, there are visible things, yes, but there are invisible and there are unobserved things about the other human being. So the question is, what do you think you know about the other? What do you think you know about someone who is different from you? Let's take away all this language abstraction. Think about somebody who comes from a different culture, maybe in your church or in your context, in your community. Think about that person and ask yourself, how much do you know about that person? How much do you think you know about that person? Let's say you think that you know the person quite well. You think you know the person quite, because you've been friends and all that. What anthropologists tell us is that what you can see, what they say to you, what they express to you, right? What they wear, all these things are fine, but there are also things that you cannot see; they are invisible to you. So let's ponder on this issue a little bit, and let's use this as a metaphor to discuss this issue. So the other refers to those who are different from you, that you and I choose to separate ourselves and compare ourselves against. So the other is the one that is distant from you, and me and us are the group of people that we identify with. Okay, with that said, let's look at this metaphor. This is an iceberg metaphor that has been used for different purposes, and anthropologists and social scientists have used this iceberg metaphor as well to talk about cultures. We all know, I'm sure you know about icebergs, right? Icebergs are basically chunks of ice, huge chunks of ice that float in the ocean. The remarkable thing about iceberg is that, as you can see in this depiction, if you see this much of thing, the ice over the surface, it's very likely that a much bigger chunk of the ice is under the water, right? I think you understand that fairly. It's a fairly simple concept. So we've got this chunk that you see here that's above the water, but also at the same time you've got this huge chunk that you cannot see that are underwater, submerged underwater. And the interesting thing about this whole model is that it has been useful to explain a lot of things, and it has become useful to explain also the thing that we mentioned earlier, which is that there are hidden dimensions of human beings, invisible and unobserved. What the iceberg model tells us is that what you see up here, that's a small percentage of who the person is. What you don't see are the invisible parts of somebody, a culture, or a person. And these are much more intense, much more deep rooted, and much more um, crucial at the heart of who the person is or what the culture is about. So that's the iceberg metaphor. Keep in mind that this is a model, means it's not literal. It's a model. It's a way of understanding, or it's a way of visualizing the reality of cultural differences. It's a metaphor, right? It's not literal. And I want you to do a bit of reflection here, a bit of, if you like, homework here. Just draw a straight line in your paper or notebook, and can you try and fill up these things? What you think might be there in these gaps? I have blotted out the words here, but I want you to think and uh, just guess what might be here. I'm going to give you, let's say, 5 minutes. Okay, so try to fill in the words that you think are there in this in the gaps in the iceberg model when it comes to culture, when it comes to intercultural understanding. So take my 5 minutes. When you see someone or when you encounter someone who is from a different culture, what are the things that you see that are visible, and what are the things that you cannot see that are invisible? Okay, I think 5 minutes is a little too long. I'm gonna ask you to just keep that note, your reflections. Um, just keep it aside for now. We'll come back to it later. Now I'm going to show you a video, and I want you to watch it very carefully, okay? And take note of what particularly stands out for you, okay? Take note, pay attention. It's a bit intense, but it's just 10 minutes. Just watch, take note, and write down whatever thing that you find interesting or stands out for you as you watch, and keep your notebook at hand so that you can take note of whatever it is that you find interesting. Here's a video. You can probably search for it later and watch it by yourself also. Oops, what's going on? Okay, you have to.
Hello, welcome to Culture Academy. Why is it so difficult for an expat to understand a foreign culture? When you come to a culture, at first you see the visible things. You see clothing, you see the food, you see the traditions that people follow, the festivities. It's very easy to see these things and think that is a culture. But there's much more to the culture than just the visible dimensions. There are hidden things. There are things that we don't see. There's a hidden dimension in every culture. There's an invisible dimension in the culture that gives us most of the trouble, the things we don't see. The anthropologist Edward Hall and later Gary Weaver studied these hidden dimensions. Edward Hall said they are hidden dimensions, they are not obvious. They studied that and they have developed the theory or the model of the iceberg or of cultures, or the cultural iceberg. That's what we want to study now, right after the introduction. So Edward Hall and Gary Weaver developed the model of the cultural iceberg. Well, if you look at an iceberg, we can see like 10% or 20% is above the surface, and there's 80 to 90% below the surface. The part of the iceberg that's above the surface we can see, but there's much more below the surface which we can't see. The visible part of the iceberg are explicitly learned. So this is what we learn when we grow up in our country, in our culture. It's consciously learned. So the parents told us how to behave and what to do. These things are easily changeable. If you go to another culture, it's changeable. We can change it very easily, and it's kind of an objective knowledge. But the things below the surface of the iceberg, it's implicitly learned. So we do not specifically learn that because the parents said so, that it's unconscious. So we learn it from the other people, we learn it in daily life without anybody necessarily telling us. These things that are below the surface are very difficult to change. It's a subjective knowledge, so we have not learned that, we really don't grasp it. Sometimes we can't even tell what it is, why we act this way, and what's going on there. First, let's look at the part that's above the surface. Well, we talked about things that we can see. It's consciously learned, it's explicitly learned. These are behaviors, they are traditions, they are customs. They are easy to observe, so you can see them very easily. You can touch them, you can taste them, you can smell them, you can hear them, there's a sound. This is all above the surface that you can easily see and learn when you enter a new culture. But the things below the surface, the internal things, the hidden things, these are core values that we have learned from our parents or from the society. These are priorities. These are beliefs. What do we believe? What God do we believe in? What are our traditions in our faith? These are attitudes. Attitudes towards other people or attitudes towards things. They are assumptions that we make. They are perceptions. And these things are below the surface. They are hidden, and it's very difficult for a foreigner to see them and to observe them. So let me give you some examples of the external culture. So first there is, for example, there's art. If you look at paintings, if you look at theater and presentations, well, you can see a little bit what's going on in the culture. The second one is language. Then also you have kind of dress, how the people are dressing, what are they wearing, how people are greeting themselves. So this is very obvious, So in some countries they go and they shake hands. In other countries they do the kisses on the cheek. And in other countries they bow down. So it's very obvious. You can see that, and you can see the differences from the different countries. Of course, there's food, So it's very obvious that in some cultures they eat a very different food than in your culture and in your country. So the food is something that's right away you will see, oh, this is different than in my place. Music is another one. So music, the songs, the tone they play, the instrument they use, it's very obvious from the outside, from the external side, that you see, well, it's very different than in my country. Now let's go and look a little bit towards the things that are not that obvious. Let us look at the hidden dimension. Of course, there's worldview, how people see the world, how they look at the world, how they look at nature. They look at leadership, for example. Leadership is another one. So is there a hierarchy, or is there a more equal leadership style? So leadership is a very hidden thing that you don't see right away. That's not that obvious to you when you come to a different country and work with people from a different culture. In the same line, there's power. Who has power in the country? Who makes the decisions? Very often, it's not very obvious who makes the decision and how the decision is made. And we think that person made the decision, but truly it might be a totally different person that takes a decision, or how the decision is made. Is it consensus? Is it that one person said that's how we do it? So decision making is a very hidden thing in the culture, and you really want to study that. Edward Hall studied quite a bit the space that's valid in a culture. In some cultures, the space is very narrow. In other cultures, it's much bigger. So, like in Latin American cultures, the space where you approach the people, or the space between people is much narrower than in Western Europe cultures. So in Western Europe cultures, I think I need my space of a meter, kind of, So whereas Latin Americans, well, they only need 50 centimeters, and if somebody comes too close to me, well, I'm uncomfortable. But we need to know that what is the value behind space? What is the value behind time? So the understanding of time is very important. When I first got to Haiti, me as a German, very punctual and very much on time. So we set a meeting for 10 o'clock, and who was there at 10 o'clock? Just the German. So none of the Haitians were there. They came at 10:15, 10:30, or maybe even 10:45, and they didn't care. For them, they have not been late. And I was sitting there, and I said, oh man, I'm wasting my time. The understanding of time is a very important issue, and we need to look into that to see what is the value behind this. Other issues might be child rearing. So how do they raise their children? Or friendship, what does friendship mean? I think for an American, friendship means something very much different than for a French person. In America, when I lived in America, people came and say, oh, this is my friend, when they introduced me. In France, if somebody would say, well, this is my friend, you nearly have to grow up with him. It's very, very hard to become a friend, a real friend for somebody in France. It's happening, but not as easy and not as fast as in America. Well, the question of gender also is one of these hidden dimensions. Gender means maybe something different for an Arab country than for a European country. So gender and roles is a very, very hidden thing, and it's very hard to understand how they function in one culture or another. So we have looked right now at the top of the iceberg, at the 10 or 20% that's seen, and then at the 80 or 90% that's not seen. The problem very often is, if we go to another culture, we often see and deal with what we can see, what we can, what's obvious, what we can embrace or can act with right now. This 10% is the basis for the evaluation of the culture. It's much harder to look at the 80 to 90%. And for us, it's not so easy to observe, and it's not so easy to learn these things. Many people only look at the tip of the iceberg, at the 10 or 20%, and make assumptions about the values and the belief system and assumptions of the culture without really understanding the culture. So what can you do? You can reflect on the hidden issues of the culture. You can think about this. You can observe the external things of the culture, but then you need to ask yourself, what's behind it? You need to really rethink, and you need to study what is behind, what are the values behind this tradition, what are the values behind this expression. You need to understand, if there are outside expressions, the people want to communicate through that. The people want to express their values, what they are thinking, what they're believing. So learn through the outside expressions, learn what's behind it, and learn the values of the culture. Ask the people a lot of questions about their core values, about their belief and belief system, about their assumptions. And most of all, look for the hidden dimension in the culture.
Okay, I hope you found that video helpful. It I think it might have been a little intense. It's quite intense for me as well. But I think there were some helpful slides, helpful terms, and some of the concepts that he explained were quite helpful, and it helped to break down some of the complex ideas. So I hope you have found that helpful. You can always browse it on YouTube. It should be available for viewing. It's called The Model of the Cultural Iceberg. So if you find it helpful, you can always view that again. But also, I wanted to put in a YouTube video here because I wanted to convey the fact that these days it's a different topic, but these days there's just so much information, so much good stuff on YouTube for free. You don't need, I mean, to a certain extent, you don't need school or colleges for these kinds of information, for these kinds of basic introductory information. You can go online. I'm not sure if you have done podcasts or not, but there are podcast channels, there are YouTube channels, there's Wikipedia, there's websites where there are so much information available for those who are interested. So it could be any topic under the sun. You can just go and browse, and YouTube is a great resource actually if you know how to use it, if you use it for the right stuff, obviously. So with that said, let's get back to exploring these few things that we've been talking. Just to summarize, the model, the iceberg model, tells that it's a model of human societies or human cultures, and it tells us that the visible things, the explicit, the conscious things that we see among people and among different cultures, these comprise only 10 to 20%. We need to keep that in mind. Very important when we meet people, when we interact with people from different contexts, or even just when you see someone who is different from you, even in terms of personality, right? The things that you see, those are just 10%, 20% of the whole person, of the whole culture. The bigger chunk of the person, the personality, the cultures are invisible. They're implicit. They are unconscious. They are deep inside, and they emerge and manifest themselves in the behaviors, in the actions that people do, in the things that people wear, in the food that people eat. But the larger chunk of the person is invisible. It reminds me of what Jesus said in his parable. He said, the out of the heart the person speaks. The words that come out, the actions that come out in the hands and in the feet, in the bodies, the behaviors that comes out from the wellspring of who you are inside. Of course, we see that in Proverbs as well, right? Out of the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. The heart is the wellspring of life. The deep-seated 80% of who you are, that is the wellspring of life. And out of that flows your behavior, your attitude, your actions, your words, and even the things that you do to one another. Now let's move on. This is called the cultural, and yeah, so this model, I'm just going to move myself around here. This model is called the cultural iceberg. Of course, again, it's a model, but it's a helpful model in my opinion. I want to give you a bit of a task at this point. Too much talking already. I want you to do a few bit of thing for yourself. Now I want you to think of your own specific context. Okay, I don't want you to think of in terms of abstract things, concept, or ideas. I want you to think of your own specific concrete context, and I want you to fill in the spaces with the relevant words. There's just one blank here, but you please feel free to add more. You can add up to 3, 4, doesn't matter. But I want you to be specific. Okay, I want you to be very particular and specific. And if it is helpful, maybe think of just a few specific things and ponder a few specific things that are up here. Okay, they're up here in the surface, the things that are seen. And I want you to ponder on what it means under the surface. So I want you to think of a specific thing that you can see and try to understand the motivations that you cannot see, right? I'll give you an example. Why do our people, the Naga people, why do we eat more rice, so much rice actually, compared to, let's say, people in the UK who eat more potatoes, or Italians who eat more pasta? So because the food we eat is the visible aspect, right? But why? What is the motivation? What is the reason why they do that? It's the invisible thing, right? So I want you to think about why we do the things that we do, and I want you to think about the specific thing, and I want you to be very specific. Again, another example, another thing that I've always wondered about my friends from Africa. They love bright colors, right? Your traditional clothes are always bright and heavy in pattern. Why is that? Maybe you know the answer, maybe you don't. Maybe speculate. I don't know. Do whatever it is you need to do, but I want you to take specific examples of things you see and try to think about the reasons of why, the meanings of that thing that you see. So take 10 minutes because this is a bit intensive. Okay, so take 10 minutes. Okay, so you've done exercise for your own context. I want you to just take this next few minutes to do a similar exercise for someone else's specific context. Okay, it could be somebody that you've met who comes from another country, or somebody from another tribe, or another who speaks another language. I want you to think about that, something that you've observed in somebody else and an other, and be specific and try to ponder why do they do the things that they do, right? Why are they fill in the blanks? Okay, uh, maybe perhaps I can give you an example. Um, when I when I studied in South Korea and I went for a visit to Japan, I used to wonder why people do not look straight at me, right? Why are people not even, like, when we cross on the streets, they just bow down, bow their heads and walk away. Like, it's not, it feels like, for me, it feels like they're ignoring me. It feels like they don't even look at me and acknowledge me. If, let's say, in the train, in the public transportation, they are all on the phone. Are they very rude? Are they trying to ignore me? So that's what I saw, and I thought, oh, are they being rude to me? What do you think? I don't know. I think the answer is that they are very polite people. They don't want to confront you. They don't want to look at you in the eye and challenge you. That for them, looking at you in the eye and confronting you face to face, that is seen as too confrontational. They are very gentle, very peaceful. Some of I've got Japanese friends as well. They would always be very polite. See, the motivation behind why they behave in this particular way, right? That's just an example. Okay, I want you to think about uh, somebody that you have met, somebody from a different culture. Be specific and try to ponder on the possible meanings beneath the surface. And by doing that, what I'm trying to understand is, can you understand somebody who is different from you? Can you understand them better when you understand the reason why they are, right? Why are they why do they do things that seems mean to you? Why do they do things that seem to be arrogant to you? Why are they loud? Why are they talking so loudly? Why are they talking so softly? Can't even hear them. Why do they talk in such and try to be manly? Or why do they talk with such squeaking, right? So think about all these things and try to understand the other by going beneath the surface. Okay, take, let's say, 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, so here's just a quick wrap up of the whole issue. Again, I've said this a number of times, but please bear with me. 10 to 20% is visible, 80 to 90% is invisible. And I think we could talk about a number of examples. Allow me to just um, share a bit of my experiences. Let's see, what experiences, what examples have I written here? We need to remember that the invisible aspects of human beings are important, right? It's not just what you see, the way they behave, the way they do, what they say. The invisible aspects of human beings are important. In fact, they are especially important because they form a bigger part, 80% of who they are. So we can talk about a lot of examples. When you encounter someone from a different culture, there's always the confusion of why are they saying this? What do they mean by that, right? Why are they treating me like that? So when you encounter someone from different culture, the intercultural encounter, in that case, this kinds of questions always comes out because you see only a thin slice of who they are, and you don't see the bigger 80% of who they really are. That is why intercultural encounters are so tricky, right? Because you're not able to understand one another. You've got a few set of words, few set of layers that you can connect with, and beyond that, it's just invisible. Okay, one example that I can give is when for Naga people, and I think generally for many Asians, even in South Korea, but especially for Naga people that we are, if someone offers you something, let's say you're hungry and you're really hungry, you want to eat something, and somebody comes and offers you something, offers me something. Let's say, here you go, here's a sandwich, take it, it's for you. Our culture tells us that it's rude to just grab, right? It's rude to grab. And first, I would say, it's okay. No, no, thanks, but I don't need it. Right? That's the cultural expectation. I'm supposed to say it's okay. I don't need it, even though I'm hungry. I really want it, but I say no, no, I don't need it. No, thanks. Right? And the other person is supposed to say, oh, come on, take it, take it. I insist. It's for you. I bought it for you. I insist. Please take it. And I'm supposed to reply if I'm extra polite, if I'm extra cultured. I would say, really? So thank you so much. I'm quite okay. I can handle it. No, no worries. Thank you. You give it to that person. To which the other person who is giving me should say, no, no, it's for you. Take it, take it. And then I can take it, right? After having said, no, no, that's okay, thanks, no, and all of that stuff. It's rude in our culture, it's rude to just grab. It's rude to just take, even when you're hungry, always say no, always say, give it to somebody else. So when I meet someone from, let's say, from the US, in their culture, for I'm very much generalizing. I'm sorry about that, but when you meet someone uh, from let's say America, and I remember some occasions when this happened. Right, they offer you something and you say no because I'm trying to be a Naga and I'm trying to be culturally sensitive, and I say no, no. That's it. I've lost a sandwich. He's not gonna offer me back because for him in his own cultural understanding, when I say no, I mean no. When I say yes, I mean yes. When I say no, I mean no. In my culture, when you say no to food, are you really saying no, or are you, what kind of no is it? So there's a cultural baggage, cultural meaning in that, right? In the things that we say. So that's one example. Another example that I can probably give you is visiting friends. I don't know how it is in your culture. In my context in Northeast India, visiting people is an important part of being in a community, right? You show up unannounced to your friend's house. You don't have to tell them. You don't have to call them ahead of time. Just show up and just hang out. And sometimes you get food. Your friends' parents will feed you. You say, "Oh, come on, join food," and then you say, "No, no, no, please, no, 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 I don't want it. Please, come on, come on." And then eventually you end up sharing a meal with them. No matter how great or how boring the food is, you share the meal together with your friends, right? When we went to Canada, I was there for 1.5 years, and my friends told me, never ever show up in my house unannounced. Always tell me ahead of time. Always plan maybe 1 week ahead, and I'll write down in the schedule. I'll clean my house and all of that. Don't show up unannounced to my house. For them, friendship means to give them privacy, to give them their own space, to allow them to do their own thing. In our Naga culture, friendship means showing up, doing whatever it is, playing together or playing music or eating food together. All of that, you do it together. So these are different ways. One is not better than the other. Both are different. Both have the advantages. Both have the disadvantages. And I'm not making any judgment at all. I think that there's a problem in the way our Naga cultures also can be, but that's not the point of this example. The point of the example is that there are different ways in which we express and we articulate friendship, in the way we articulate hospitality, and we should not judge one another, right? But what happens when we don't understand that? If I don't understand these invisible things, if I have a Canadian friend and I just want to show my love to my friends, and I just go to their house unannounced, that's not good for them. That's not friendship for them, right? For them, that's it's what's that word I'm looking for? It's intrusion into their life, intrusion into their private space. On the other hand, if a Canadian comes to the Naga Hills and he or she never visits us, never comes to our house for food, as a Naga, for me, if I don't understand the cultural difference, I would be minding. I would not be happy because, because I want them to come and I want them to be friends. I want them to be with us and eat our food and all that stuff, right? But no, that's not going to happen because of the cultural differences, right? I hope the language. I hope the examples are understandable. I think these kinds of experiences we have all gone through at one point or the other. The other word that people have used is culture shock. Culture shock, right? If you go to a place that's different from yours and you try to live in the way you live, you try to behave in the way that you behave at home, sometimes there's a culture shock, there's misunderstanding. Sometimes you go up and you treat someone in a way that you think works. Maybe a good example is in the ways that we joke, our humor. Sometimes our jokes are perceived as rude in some other cultures. Some people from some cultures love to laugh, like to have a good time, to laugh loudly, hang out with friends and laugh, and in the bus. Some people find it very offensive. They would turn around and look why they're laughing so much, why they're making such a huge noise and disturbing everybody else. So there are different ways in which cultures and behaviors are expressed. And the point here is that we see only a bit, and there are a huge chunk that we don't see. And when it comes to intercultural encounters, we need to be careful that we are not misled by only the things that we see. We need to be aware there are deeper things that are going on in another person's mind or culture. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about maybe a metaphor. Okay, I think you have heard about the story of the Titanic. The Titanic was built in 1910, and this is a small excerpt from a website. Why did the Titanic sink? An estimated 100,000 people gathered at a dock in Belfast in Ireland on March 31st, 1911, to watch the launch of the Royal Mail ship Titanic. Considered to be an unsinkable ship, Titanic was the largest and the most luxurious cruise liner of its day. Measuring more than 882 feet long from prow to stern, the length of 4 city blocks, imagine 4 city blocks, and 175 feet high, and weighing more than 46,000 tons. It boasted state-of-the-art technology and including a sophisticated electrical control panel, 4 elevators, and an advanced wireless communications system that could transmit Morse code. Imagine 4 elevators in a ship. And look at the painting here. Look at the number of windows that are shown here. 1, 2, 3. At least there's, I think, 4 floors within this thing itself, and then there's 3 more up here. So this was a massive ship. And when it was built, it was supposed to be unsinkable. It was supposed to be the sturdiest, most stable, most reliable ship. But we all know how the story panned. Sadly, the ship met with an accident, and the ship was broken into 2, right? This is quite a tragic and well-known story. Of course, you know why that happened. Why did that happen? It happened because of here we go. It happened because of an iceberg. It happened because they did not see. They were not able to steer away from an iceberg, and the problem was that they saw they could not see what was underneath the surface. Right, huge boulder of iceberg. They could see only the thin slice, the small over the surface kind of layer that they could see, and they could not see the bottom. And so when the Titanic could not evade, it went, and on top of the water it looks fine, but they crashed onto the iceberg and it started leaking and so on and so forth. And hundreds of people lost their life, and the ship, of course, was sunk on that day. A tragic story, but it shows us the power and the danger of an obstruction that you cannot see in front of you because it's submerged, it's underneath the surface. And I think that's a scary but interesting and helpful example for us. Here's a summary of today's thoughts. Firstly, be aware that people have invisible dynamics and motivations to their visible actions. Okay? We first be aware that regardless of who you meet, even people from within your culture, be aware that everyone has invisible dynamics. They have visible actions, but they have invisible dynamics and motivations to their visible actions, especially for people who are from a different context, different cultural context. Be especially aware that different cultures have different ways of doing things, different ways of thinking, and different expectations, right? Me as a Naga, when I said no to you when you gave me food, my expectation was that you will say back, "Oh, take it," and keep insisting for 2-3 times, right? So we have different expectations. We have different ways of doing things. So be aware that different cultures have different ways of doing things and thinking and diverse expectations. And thirdly, because we do not want to crash, we do not want to collide with others who are different from us. Just because the small thing, the small aspects of our culture that we can see, just because we can get along doesn't mean that the bottom parts can get along. The unseen, invisible aspects could well crash and lead to conflict. And on top, it looks like everything is okay. We are understanding one another. We are giving each other space and going about in our lives. But the layers, the submerged motivations, submerged dynamics could be in conflict. And we don't want that. We don't want that in intercultural encounters, right? So look out for the icebergs. Look out for the things that are invisible. Be aware of other people. Try your best to understand people when you encounter someone who is other than you, who is different from you. That is the end of the slide for this section. We're going to take a quick break, and there's a lot of things that we have covered. I want you to just reflect back on that and think about your own context, and just take a quick break, just stretch a bit and do whatever it is you need to get rejuvenated, and then we'll return for a quick final section. Okay, so we are at the final section of for today's lecture. We have just wanted to begin with this slide one more time. When we talk about encountering the other, we need to be aware that first we need to be conscious that firstly we want to be aware that people have invisible dynamics, invisible motivations. What we see versus 80% of what we don't see. Be aware when you meet someone, encounter someone from intercultural context, that there are invisible things that motivate their actions. Secondly, be aware that different cultures have different ways of doing things. Not just in the visible aspects, but even in the invisible aspects, there are different ways in which different cultures do different things and different expectations as well. Thirdly, keeping these two things in mind, we want to make sure that we don't crash, we don't collide with one another who are different from us. Look out for the icebergs in these intercultural encounters. Okay. I hope that's clear enough. And if it's not, then I'm happy to engage with your questions or your comments or feedback somewhere or the other. So I hope we can get around to doing that. I want to move to the final section, and in this section, let's call it, how do you see the other? How do you see the others? Before we get into this, how do you see other? I want you to think about it. I want you to think about your own context. I want you to think about yourself in your church, your workplace, and I want you to think, how do you treat those who are other from you? In what way? And I know that in this case, we all have shortcomings, right? No, none of us are perfect. None of us have got it all together. We all fail in some way or the other, and especially in this aspect, it's so hard to understand people. It's so hard to appreciate when people don't agree with you or people are not like you. But the question is, how do you see the other? How do you view the others? Okay. Just think about that for a minute or two. How do you see other? Think about the person who is the most different in your congregation. Are you thinking? Yeah, you're thinking, right? Think about that person. And I want you to question yourself, do I judge them? Am I mean to them because they're different? Do I try to do more work and try to understand things from their perspective? What about the people who refuse to become like you, who refuse to think like you? How do you treat them? How do you engage with them? How do you encounter them? I want to suggest that there are many ways in which we encounter someone who is different or other from you, right? But I want to suggest that there are at least 4 ways, okay? The first one is to consider them as significant other. Significant other. I know that you've probably heard of that word, significant other, and most likely you've heard of it in terms of a spouse or a husband or a wife, in the sense that your wife or your husband is your significant other. What does it really mean? Have you ever stopped to ponder upon the meaning of this? Significant other. A significant other is someone about whom we have some degree of specific knowledge, and thus we pay attention to what we perceive to be his or her personal thoughts, feelings, or expectations. In this case, significant does not mean that the person is important, and it doesn't refer to the common parlance of a romantic relationship. It's someone that you care for, someone that you have intention to know. So, although significant other has been used to refer to a wife or a husband or your fiance or someone who you are romantically uh, connected to, in its original term, significant other doesn't mean that. It involves definitely your spouses or your the one that you're in a relationship with. There is definitely a significant other, but there are other ways in which significant others are uh, are observed, are represented, manifested. It simply means that you consider the other person as significant. You consider the other person as someone you want to know about, someone whose thoughts, whose feelings, and whose expectations you are interested in, you're curious about, right? So, as this definition says, it's somebody about whom you have some degree of specific knowledge. So, specific knowledge, it has to be specific knowledge. What does that person like? Not just general things like, oh, he's an African, so I think Africans like this, right? So he must like rap, or he must like, not like, it has to be specific knowledge about what you as a person like, what you as a person prefer, what are your feelings. So it has to be specific knowledge. And again, I want you to think about your own congregation, or your own people, your own friends or family. How much specific knowledge do you know about them? That's a very tough question, actually. If you really think about it, how much specific knowledge do you know about them? Do we just look at them as one people, as like sheep lost without shepherd that you need to teach and lead and be a boss over, or do you really know them specifically? As this definition says, are the people in your life, the others in your life, do you pay attention to what you think is his personal thought, her personal thoughts, her feelings, his or her feelings, his or her expectations? Again, these are tough questions, especially we're talking in terms of dealing with people in our congregation. But when we talk about intercultural relationship, it's even harder, because it's hard enough to care and to love and to respect and to know the specific knowledge about a person, different person. Forget about cultures and all that, okay? Just between husband and wife, it's hard enough, right, to know the specific knowledge. Of course, it is a joy to get to know someone. It's joy to get to know your family members or your friends, for example. But it's not an easy thing. It involves a significant amount of self-sacrifice. You need to stop thinking only about yourself. You need to stop thinking only about what interests you. One of the things that I've observed in my I'm married now. Me and my wife have been married for many years. We're actually expecting our first kid, first child, in a few days time, which is the reason why I'm sending out the video slightly late. But in any case, one thing I've observed is that when me and my wife, we hang out and let's say we want to watch a movie together, I've realized to my embarrassment that we end up watching the kind of movies that I like, right? And that's a bad example of knowing your spouse, of caring for your spouse. I'm interested only in my interest, and I know what she likes. At least that's a good thing. I mean, that at least if you're married, you should at least know what your wife likes. But the fact that we end up doing and watching the movies that only I like, it's to my embarrassment. But I bring that as an example, and that's, we're talking about a spouse. If we're talking about people from different cultures, do you get to do you try hard to understand somebody who's different from you in your congregation, or in the places that you interact with people? Do you try hard to understand them and to appreciate their preference, their specific knowledge of what they like, who they are, their feelings? These are tough things, right? And so the model of significant other is where you are interested, you're intentional to know who the other person is. Now, I want to be clear here. You cannot have significant other of the whole world. There's a limited number of people that you can get to know on a personal level. They say that I've read somewhere that you can get to know up to 100 people, 150 people, beyond which is just You can't. It's quite hard, if not impossible, to spread out your relationships to thousands or beyond a few hundreds. That's because significant others take energy, takes effort, and in order to get to know people, you have to spend time with them. And all of us have got only 24 hours. We've got only a lifespan, right? We can't do that for everyone. So obviously, we all know that having Facebook friends of 300, 400, 500, 600 people, some people have 1,000 friends, some people have 2,000 friends. It's impossible to really know those people, especially when it comes to intercultural relationships. But significant others are others that you intentionally try to know and you intentionally care for with specific knowledge, right? So ideally, significant others is the way to go. And at least within your circle, within your family, within your church, you should be trying, we should all be trying to know others as significant in the congregation. So that's the first one, significant other. Is that how you see the other in your congregation? The second one is a bit negative. It's called generalized other. And this involves painting broad strokes based on generalization and stereotypes. There's no effort to understand another person. And in extreme cases, this can lead to negative generalization and depreciation of those who are different from us. What does this mean? I'm sure you understand this, but allow me to explore this and reflect. Please reflect with me as well. Instead of having specific knowledge about a person, in this generalized othering, the metaphor is to use a big brush and just paint, no details, no specificity, just brush. Okay, yellow, all yellow, green, all green, black, all black, white, all black, all white, and you create this generalized, this kind of characteristic that has no details, no specificity, right? I think you understand what I mean. There's no effort to understand another person. Okay, that guy is from Asia. He's from China. He must be like that. Oh, okay, he must be like that. Or the guy's American. American. So there's no effort to understand the person. Instead of that, we use broad strokes to generalize and to create stereotypes and to treat people according to those stereotypes, right? Sometimes I think it's helpful. I mean, helpful in the sense that these are basic ways of engaging with one another on the most basic sense, but in the best case scenario, right? But in the worst case scenario, it can lead to negative generalization, and negative generalization can be insulting, it can be offensive, and it can create permanent trauma in people. Not to mention that it can cause depreciation of people who are different from us. Let's take an example. Let me try to think of any example of any from my experience in this case. Okay, so here's an example. Whenever people see me and I introduce myself, they'll say, "Oh, you're from China, right? You're from China. Oh, you must be a student who came from China." That's pretty much what most people generally think when they look at me. And I have a suspicion that most people who see me, first they would think of that. And that's fine. I'm used to that, right? I'm used to that because that's the first impression, the first kind of feeling that you get when you see me and when you observe me on the first encounter. But it cannot remain there. You got to talk to me. You got to hear what I have to say, right? You have to listen to what I have to say, and then when you listen to me, you realize that, oh, he's not from China. He's from India. Oh, okay, he's from northeast part of India. Okay, he doesn't speak Chinese. No, his grandfather is not Chinese. He's not he was born and raised from there. His grandfathers, his ancestors lived there in that part of India. Then you realize that there's a lot of complexity in every human being, every person. If I have met you, and if I just stereotyped you, saying, okay, you're from that part of Africa, so generally people are like this, so I think they'll be like this. How would you feel about that? I think that would be extremely rude and offensive, right? Instead of caring to know you and caring to know about you and your families and your experience and your what you have gone through your life, instead of that, if I just stereotype you, okay, that's the bunch from Rwanda, that's the bunch from Uganda, that's the bunch from Korea, that's the bunch from India, that just takes away the beauty of humanity, doesn't it? So the generalized other is a way of treating others with generalization. When you see someone walking on the street who look a certain way, and you say, "Oh, that must be a Chinese businessman, or that must be an Indian businessman." I think he's like that, and you cook up all these stories because of generalizations. I think that's a really that's a really mean way of treating others. Instead of that, I think the effort should be to understand another person. Not all stereotypes are harmful. Stereotypes are can be dangerous as well, right? And it leads, of course, to the depreciation of those who are different from us. What I mean by that is, when you refuse to when I meet you, and in let's say I get a chance to come to Rwanda, and when I meet you, and when I'm more interested in the stereotypes, when I treat you with those stereotypes, I I'm refusing to hear your story. I'm refusing to hear the uniqueness that you embody, the backgrounds that you come from, the way that God has worked in your lives. Those are all unique to you, right? Even though you come from a specific kind of country, it might have a completely unique, completely amazing story. But when I refuse to know you, when I just generalize you, I depreciate the the amazing things that God has done for you. I depreciate your achievements. I depreciate your uniqueness, your talent, your insights and your wisdom. When I just say, "Oh, that's the Rwandan, the bunch from Rwanda," I've completely depreciated all the beauty and all the wonderful things that you embody, right? The treasures and wisdom and talent and experiences and God's blessings that you embody. That's not good. That's not good for us as Christians. So generalize others is not the way to go. We need to be careful. We need to assess that we don't fall into the trap of generalizing those who are others different from us. The third one is called fetishized other. This is a bit tricky, but I'm sure you'll understand what I mean when I explain it to you. It involves the unhealthy obsession and the worship of others based on their power, wealth, and prospect for gaining for self. In other words, you have an obsession and you have a fetish for someone who's different from you because they have wealth, because they have power, and because they have the prospect of bringing you up for your gain. You see what I mean? It's a fetishing of those who are different from you because of who they are, because of what they can give you. At the end of the day, there's a very selfish kind of orientation. We may look like I may look like I'm being humble, I'm being I'm being simple, and I'm willing to put myself down for the sake of lifting up others. It may look that way in first impression, but ultimately, I would be only fetishizing others because it brings me something good. It's beneficial for me. And so this leads, as I've written in the second paragraph, this leads to idealizing others and being subservient to their expectations. Another word for that would be servant mentality, to become a slave mentality to those we think will give us good things. We are good to those who we think will give us good things. And that's a messed up way to live, if I may tell you that. We fetishize others because we think that they can give us something nice or something beneficial for us. That's a forgive me for saying this, but that's a very sick way of living. I've met Uh, I have experienced the temptation myself. I've met people who live like that, who live fetishizing others who are more powerful or wealthy, who are always sucking up to those who are more powerful, and that is, my friends, that's not an ideal way to live. It leads to the treatment of others for one's profit or for one's benefit. I think classic example. I need to be careful here, but a classic example could be the way a lot of people treat politicians. Right? We fetishize these politicians. We put them up in the pedestal. We quote unquote pray for them. We support them and we vote for them because we believe that they would benefit us later. They would give us good things when they come to power. And so we bring them up, we praise them, we say all these things, but it's for one's profit. The moment you realize, the moment these voters, many of these voters realize that this person is not going to fulfill their demands, it's out for the person. Like they will cook up scandals and they will cook up stories and completely tarnish the image, the public image of the person. Fetishizing others has been, even in history, it has been the way that we have observed in the history of the world. And I just want to echo this and say it is not a good way to live. It's been a long day of talking. Please excuse my voice, it's a bit hoary at this point. What else can I say here? Yeah, so the word, the concept of fetishized other, I would just say that it's unhealthy. It's self-centered. In yeah, I think I'll keep it at that. I could say much more, but I think we need to keep moving. The third one, obviously, the third and the best way of treating others is the respected other. I have not changed the. Hang on, I need to. Give me a minute. There you go. So the respected other is a relationship in which we recognize differences. That's the first important thing. We recognize that we are different. We don't want a world in which we all look the same, we all talk the same, we all have the same culture. That would be boring, right? We call that's called hegemony, where dominant culture tries to impose a certain way of doing things, certain way of dressing, certain way of eating, and insist that that is the best way. That is not respect. That is oppression. In the relationship of respected other, we recognize that I'm different from you, and you're different from that person, another person. You recognize the differences, respect the differences. Secondly, you acknowledge the other's significance. Another very important point. As we acknowledge our own significance and our own locatedness, you also acknowledge the other person's significance and other person's locatedness. As we insist that my culture is also important, we also need to recognize that others' cultures are important as well. Others' ways of doing things are legitimate, and others' methods are also equally important. In a spirit of self sacrifice, selflessness, and mutual respect, I just want to say a few things about self sacrifice. Self sacrifice doesn't mean like the previous way of relating, which is fetishize others. Self sacrifice doesn't mean beating yourself and stripping yourself unnecessarily. Self sacrifice means acknowledging yourself, owning up to who you are, and being selfless about it. It doesn't mean stripping away of who you are. It means a respect, acknowledgement of who you are, and a mutual acknowledgement of who others are as well. So, in a spirit of self sacrifice, selflessness, and mutual respect, we recognize others' differences, we acknowledge others' significance, and we respect others. So, in other words, Intercultural relationships, intercultural encounters are important, and they are crucial, and they must happen. We must learn how to coexist and co-relate with one another, and at the same time be aware that we don't crash into one another, just like the icebergs. At the same time, we make sure that we don't we make sure that we respect one another and we respect each other's differences and each other's significance. So here are the four ways in which we relate to the other: significant other, generalized other, fetishized other, and respected other. I wonder which one you find yourself more closest to in your relationship. And I know that when in our different relationships with different people, we crisscross and we emphasize on one more in one relationship and the other more in another relationship. But I wonder what might be your situation. I would like to, this is the last slide, and I would like to just challenge you to go away with these thoughts, and I want you to think about it for yourself. And perhaps one assignment that I could give you, I haven't written it down here, but I want you to think about your own context, just like we did in a few slides back. Let me see if I can get back to there. Something like this. And I want you to think of your own context and be specific. Think of people around you, and in a mode of self-reflection. Okay, so here's the assignment. In a mode of self-reflection, reflect where you are in these ways of relationship, where you are, and be honest. Write it down. You don't have to tell me, you don't have to show anyone. Reflect honestly on maybe a few people in your church or in your circle who are different from you, and try to ask yourself, where am I in these ways of relating, and how can I move to a better dynamic of relation? How can I move if, let's say, I'm in a relationship where I'm fetishizing others who are different from me, or I'm in a relationship in which I am generalizing the other. How can I move from there to one of respect, mutual respect, or even significant other, right? I want you to think about that, and I want you to pray about that, and let it be your assignment, okay? Let me pray, and then I'm going to close this lecture, okay? Our Father in heaven, we thank you that you have called us to ministry, whether in this full-time ministry or even in our vocation, in our works. We thank you, Lord, that you, O God, showed us how to love, how to respect those who are different from you. You loved us even when we were imperfect, when we were still sinners. You loved us, and help us to embody and reflect the same kind of love to the people around us, especially to those who are different from us. Give us the grace so that we may learn to respect others and to intentionally get to know them and love them and care for them in a way that is honoring to you. So we pray for ourselves, pray that you will bless our reflections and even bless the rest of the lectures that we have ahead of us. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, thank you so much for your attention. I hope that has been helpful. I look forward to getting your feedback. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.